was really charming. Lucinda, tight, tight, tight. Man, that fete was really sweet. Food like gallon, plenty liquor to drink. So many brands of whiskey, so much different rum and brandy champagne. Hallelujah! I couldn't resist the mixture of gin and coconut water. Need a good Lucinda. Lord, how we drunk and jamming. To jam was my delight. Everybody was really jamming. Lucinda, tight, tight, tight.
How are you doing this evening? My name is Stephen Fullwood, and I am the Assistant Curator for the Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books Division, and I want to welcome you to the Schomburg Center. In the 1990s, the center initiated a project to document Caribbean immigrants who settled to this country. We acquired several collections related to this topic over the years, including the records of two benevolent associations, the British Virgin Island Benevolent Association and the Bermuda Benevolent Association. The Antigua-Barbuda Progressive Society records complements these collections, but they also relate to several subject foci of other collections in the division. The Antigua-Barbuda Progressive Society was formed in 1934 to aid Antiguans who immigrated to New York during the Great Depression. The Society's papers include membership forms, minutes, correspondence, financial information, and photographs. These records are extremely important. They divulge the nature of assistance offered to immigrants upon their arrival in New York City, and the Society interacted with the Harlem community and other Caribbean benevolent societies, and the records thus offer insight into both the inter-Caribbean, African-American relations, and intra-Caribbean relations in the migration context. Lastly, the records illuminate the identity negotiation and politics of children of immigrants. I'd like to take this time also to acknowledge Dr. Edwina Ashinikwe for bringing the collection, if you would give her a hand. I'm not sure if all of you have seen the exhibition, but if you haven't seen it this evening, please come back. It will be up until January 4th, 2014. And right now, I'd like to bring to the stage the director of the Antigua and Barbuda Tourism Office in New York City. If you would come up, please.
Good evening, everyone. Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Dr. the Honorable Baldwin Spencer, Director Dr. Khalil Mohammed here at the Schomburg, as well as Deputy Director Cara Odlige. She's also Senior Administration and Staff here at the Schomburg. Edwina Ashinikwe, who is the Curator and Archivist. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the President of the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society, Ms. Roz Alatunje, and her executive. Antiguans and Barbudans, friends of Antigua and Barbuda, and I really hope everyone has had an opportunity to see the exhibit. The honor is mine to give the opening remarks, and I will just attempt to give you an overview because this is a story that spans several decades. This is a story about a journey that many of us, or our foreparents, might have taken from our island capital in St. John's, Antigua, to Harlem, the capital of the world. The year was 1934, 100 years since slavery had been abolished in Antigua, one of the first British colonies where the enslaved were emancipated. Thousands of Antiguans and Barbudans had joined the Great Migration to the United States in search of better economic opportunities. They were attracted to a country that appealed to their sense of dignity and worth, where their work ethic would help them advance. FDR was the 32nd president of the United States, and America was a country in the midst of the worst economic crisis in its history, the Great Depression. The nation appeared to be falling into an economic abyss, and many observers feared that without immediate and dramatic action, the country might well slip into revolution. Caught in a web of despair, many of these immigrants who had come to America to make a better life for themselves and their families back home found themselves on the breadline. Without a support system, they walked the streets of New York City in search of work or a bit of food, doled out from the hundreds of soup kitchens set up to keep the wageless from starvation. FDR's response to this unprecedented crisis was to initiate the New Deal, a series of economic measures designed to alleviate the worst effects of the Depression, reinvigorate the economy, and restore confidence to a deeply discouraged population. The most famous measure was the Social Security Administration. But in the absence of immigration laws, undocumented immigrants, many who toiled, harboring great expectations of prosperity and equality in the land of the free, were disillusioned. They had been left in the cold, and what was a new deal for Americans became a raw deal for them. Thrust between two world wars, inspired by economic boom, and surrounded by an atmosphere of artistic revolt, after 100 years of emancipation, Antiguans and Barbudans brought with them some experience with small-town politics, black rule, cooperation, and fighting to end colonialism. Under the leadership of Bishop James P. Roberts, 22 immigrants made a pledge to improve themselves, help their community, and help their country. The Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society emerged as one of many immigrant community groups formed to provide assistance to the wageless. In essence, the haves reached out to help the have-nots. The Harlem Renaissance had begun, and Antiguans and Barbudans assimilated easily into the movement of race consciousness that bound together people of Afro descent with a shared history of oppression. I trust that you will find the exhibit and the panel discussion both enlightening and inspiring, as it celebrates an important period in Antigua and Barbuda's history. As we celebrate 32 years of political independence in Antigua and Barbuda, I want to commend the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society and its current membership for keeping the lighthouse burning. Remember, before we had a national flag, we had a lighthouse right here in Harlem. Okay, we will segue into the panel discussion, and the pleasure is mine to introduce this evening's moderator, Dr. Edwina Ashinikwe. And just to give you a background on Dr. Nikwe's experience, she received her PhD in Caribbean and African diaspora history from NYU in 2007, following which she spent a year as a postdoctoral fellow at the Carter G. Woodson Institute for African American and African Studies. She has been the archivist in the Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books Division here at the Schomburg since November 2008. She facilitated the donation of the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society records, and along with her assistant curator, Stephen Fullwood, proceeded with the collection, and it is now available for research. Edwina and her team created the exhibition that we are about to unveil here today, or it already has been unveiled, A Lighthouse in New York. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Edwina Aishi Nikwe.
Thank you, Doreed. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you to our panel this evening. Our panelists will give us some background on the Antigua Barbuda Progressive Society, as well as the records that were donated here to the Schomburg, and also give us some insight into their experiences as Antiguan immigrants, and actually Caribbean immigrants as well, because Taisha is of Caribbean heritage. After their remarks, I will moderate a brief discussion with them and then open it up for some questions from the audience. So without further ado, I will introduce our panelists in the order in which they will speak. Maria Roz Olatunji is the current president of the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society. She hails from Hotos, St. John's, Antigua, and migrated to Brooklyn, New York in the late 1960s. Roz attended Fashion Institute of Technology, Manhattan and Queens Community College. She has worked in the textile industry for over 20 years and also has 21 years experience in the global logistics industry and is currently employed as an import-export traffic manager at an outerwear company. She became a member of the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society in 2004 and served on the board as recording secretary, financial secretary, treasurer, CFO, and vice president. Roz is an ardent community activist and a committed mother and grandmother. Valerie Harris Pohl was born in Antigua, Barbuda on September 22, 1949, and having lived in the United States for over 20 years, is also an American citizen by naturalization. Valerie is a trained journalist by profession and holds a bachelor's degree in the arts and a master's in communication. She has held positions as a manager, administrator, teacher, editor of publications here in New York and in Antigua. Valerie has made important contributions to Antiguan politics, culture, business, and journalism since her return to the island in 1989. She is a founding member of the Antiguan Jazz Society, and she was also the Prime Minister's speechwriter when he was leader of the opposition. She is currently the executive assistant to the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Dr. the Honorary Baldwin Spencer, and is responsible for the day-to-day running of the Prime Minister's Secretariat. Among her honors is the Antiguan 1995 Person of the Year and the Salome Drysdale Excellence Award for Women from the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society. Taisha Maddox is a fourth-year PhD student in the History Department at New York University. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, she is the daughter of a St. Lucian mother and an African-American father from the South. Growing up, she navigated the dichotomy of being a second-generation Caribbean immigrant and her father's strong Southern upbringing. Her family background and experiences navigating both these backgrounds has greatly shaped not only her worldview, but her research interests as well. Taisha attended Cornell University, where she received a bachelor's in history and Africana studies, and she later received her master's in Africana studies at Cornell, where her thesis compared Caribbean American and African American social, cultural, and political interactions prior to and after World War II. In 2010, she came to NYU, where she currently works in the African diaspora field. Taisha's work examines the Caribbean diaspora in the United States. Her research has taken her to several archives in the Caribbean, including Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, and St. Lucia. And Taisha has also spent a significant amount of time here at the Schomburg Center. And lastly, Beverly George. Beverly Benjamin George was born in St. John's, Antigua, and moved to New York in 1978. She holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Management Information Systems from York College and a Juris Doctor degree from the Jacob D. Schomburg Law Center at Touro College. She is admitted to practice law in the courts of the state of New York and to both the Southern and Eastern Federal District Courts of New York. She is an adjunct professor in the Continuing Education Department at Queens College, and she serves as legal counsel to the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society and is also the founder and president of Friends of the Antigua Public Library. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, and I'll be back after their remarks.
Good evening. On behalf of the officers, directors, and members of the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society, I extend greetings to the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, the Honorable Dr. Winston Baldwin Spencer, and Lady Jacqueline Spencer. The Antigua and Barbuda 2013 delegation to the United Nations, elders of the community, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a lighthouse in New York. This is indeed a marriage of two organizations. The Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, founded in 1926 in Harlem, New York, by Mr. Arturo Alfonso Schomburg, with his private collections of books and manuscripts, and the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society, formerly the Antigua Progressive Society, established in 1934 with 22 nationals under the leadership of James P. Roberts. And they did set up roots in Harlem, New York. As stated by DeReed's opening statement, the dire need for the societies at this time in the US. Some of the benevolent societies which existed at that time were the Montserrat Progressive, the Anguilla Progressive, the Barbuda Progressive, the British Virgin Islands Progressive, the Police Benevolent Progressive, just to name a few. At the time of Mr. Schomburg's passing in 1938, Progressive was a mere 4-year-old baby, struggling to find common ground after the Great Depression. The society saw the necessity to band together to help the newly arrived immigrant nationals who left the homeland in search of better lives. The Schomburg's main focus is collecting, preserving, and sharing our history throughout the world, thus maintaining the support and longevity of Black culture. This is indeed a marriage made in heaven. In 1935, Progressive set their bylaws and was incorporated by the state of New York. As told by the oral history of the elders, Progressive in the early days held their meetings in each other's homes until they purchased a brownstone in Harlem, New York, on 122nd Street. The papers of the Schomburg tells a story of a group of people who were dedicated, well-organized, with business ethics, and stayed connected to family and organizations back home. In the early days, the society dedicated itself to the principles of promoting and cultivating social and intellectual activities among its members, assisting the sick and death benefits, and giving assistance to nationals here and at home. The society started a junior league, a group of juveniles who were molded and trained to take over the mantle. In the exhibition, we saw the membership of the organization at one time over 300 nationals. Their noted fundraisers at the Renaissance Hotel and Smalls Paradise were very successful ventures, and this was a place to meet and greet all nationals. The concept of bring your own bag, where everyone brought food and drinks and mingled and shared with each other, creating a home away from home. In the 1970s and 80s, this period showed the society as being very involved in the care of the elderly of the society, ensuring that sick benefits were distributed. The sick committee was very active, visiting the shut-ins and making their lives comfortable. Christmas packages of donations were sent home to different institutions, and social activities such as bus rides were an annual event. The upkeep of their landmark property became a struggle to maintain, and members who would come in and offer their services for free just to keep this building going. The organization at this point visited churches in the community as they celebrated their annual anniversary services. In the 1990s, as more national organizations were established in New York, membership in Progressive decreased, and by 2000, there was a need to restructure the organization by revising the bylaws and shifting the purpose and direction. In 2011, with unanimous votes of the Board of Directors and the general membership, our archival papers, 1934 through 1985, were donated to this globally renowned institution for research. The preparation and launching of this exhibition has been an injection of enthusiasm for us at Progressive, and we hope that you all will share the same experience. As we say, each one, teach one. Please invite your families and friends to come visit and experience the history of Antigua and Barbuda. When some would ask us, why the Schomburg? We respond, why not the Schomburg? Progressive was established in Harlem, functioned in Harlem, owned real estate in Harlem, and is embedded in the history of Harlem. We have come home to the Schomburg. Preserving and sharing our archival history is what the Schomburg Center of Research in Black Culture does best. We ask for your continued prayers and support as we get the work done, preparing the organization for the next generations. Ladies and gentlemen, today the ancestors are smiling. The story has been told. Thank you.
Mrs. Raj Olatunji, President of the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society, Ms. Gina Phillip, Vice President, Ms. Claudine Murphy, Treasurer, Ms. Mona Wire Manigo, Public Relations Officer and Recording Secretary, Ms. Jasmine Mack, Financial Secretary, all directors, officers, and members of the Society, Dr. Edwina Ashi Nukwe, Archivist, Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books Division here at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, fellow Antiguans and Barbudans and friends. Ladies and gentlemen, it would be remiss of me if I did not recognize and acknowledge among us this evening the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Dr. Winston Baldwin Spencer and Lady Spencer. Prime Minister Spencer has been here all week, attending the 68th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations, and he has with him a delegation, and I see before me Ambassador Anthony Liverpool, who is now the permanent representative to the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I stand here as a proud recipient of the Salome Drysdale Excellence Award for Women, which was conferred on me in 2009 on the 75th anniversary of the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society. I would like to thank the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society for keeping the name of Salome Drysdale alive, as she was one of the 22 immigrants, along with James Roberts, who started the Antigua Progressive Society, which was later renamed the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society when a bylaw change incorporated Barbudan New Yorkers, who were a part of the now defunct Barbuda Benevolent Society, which was established in 1915 and lasted for 62 years. The Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society is the oldest of all of the Antiguan and Barbudan associations in New York and serves as a model for other budding associations. Salome Drysdale was a feisty young activist who, without her husband's knowledge, took their home papers to the bank to secure a loan for the purchase of what we now enjoy as the Antiguan House, located at 12 West 122nd Street in Harlem, New York. The Antiguan House provides nationals of the Antiguan and Barbudan community here in the diaspora with a place where they can come together to share and exchange stories and ideas, enjoy cultural activities, meet and greet visiting political figures, and uphold the founders' original vision. I also want to offer congratulations to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture for receiving and securing the records from the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society and including these letters and records in their archival collection. The historical perspective that is showcased here this evening of the work and continued existence of the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society for almost 100 years will surely benefit future generations. This, for me, is extremely exciting, as the history of my country is now in the #1 site in New York City, where our history will be preserved for posterity. My story as an immigrant to this great country, America, is somewhat fascinating. My grandfather, Clyde Harris, who was born in the late 1800s in the village of Willikes, migrated to the United States in pursuit of a better life. he had a dream. His dream was to work hard and return to Antigua and Barbuda one day to join the family he had left behind. He left Antigua for Santo Domingo in 1916, went on to Cuba, and arrived by boat in America in 1918. 2 years after the birth of my father, Horatio Theophilus Harris. My father and his 2 other siblings met their father for the very first time in 1972 when he returned to Antigua to meet his children that he had not seen in 56 years. I met my grandfather in New York in 1969 when I was 20 years old, 3 years prior to my father actually meeting his father. It was never established whether my grandfather was a member of the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society. But through conversations and research, I learned that he too, along with friends of his, assisted other immigrants arriving in New York from other Caribbean islands. My grandfather died and was buried in New York in the early 90s, a few years short of being a centenarian. My father also died in New York in 2010 at age 94, and his remains were transported to Antigua for burial. I arrived in America as the new immigrant in the 1960s and lived here for over 2 decades before returning to Antigua and Barbuda. Like my grandfather, who had a dream, I too had a dream. Even though our dreams differed, my dream then was to acquire an education, work hard, and return home before my 50th birthday to seek political office and to make my contribution to nation building. Today, I can say that my dream has been partially realized. Please permit me to explain the life experiences that I have garnered thus far relating to my dream and where I stand today. I am the recipient of an associate degree in the arts, a bachelor's in the arts with a major in English from Adelphi University, and a master's degree in communication. That takes care of my educational pursuits. I worked for 19 long years at various corporations in this country, and on my return home, I immediately got involved in the political process, aligning myself with the opposition party that is now the government of Antigua and Barbuda since 2004. Why I say that my dream has been partially realized is because I now enjoy dual citizenship, and the Constitution of my country, though acknowledging dual citizenship, does not allow me to pursue elected political office. That was one of my dreams. However, I am not barred from being part of the political process. Today, I hold the position of Executive Assistant to the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda. This position allows me to serve and contribute to nation building. Grandfather was not that fortunate. He never had the opportunity to return to Antigua before he was 50 years old. As I told you, he returned after 56 years. We both have treaded different paths, but with the same goal, a dream then, and me, the dreamer now. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Taisha Maddox, and as Edwina said, I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate in the history department at New York University. I've spent many hours here at the Schomburg researching various Caribbean organizations, and I'm very thankful for the ABPS for donating their records. My dissertation examines early 20th century Caribbean immigration to New York City and the significance of Caribbean American mutual aid and benevolent associations to the overall immigrant experience. I'm particularly interested in its implications for the formation of a pan-Caribbean American identity and a wider Black identity. These types of social and cultural organizations serve as an important part of the history of immigration to the U.S. I was very excited to happen upon the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society records earlier this year. These records serve as a valuable resource to understanding Caribbean immigrant life in the 20th century. I'm very thankful, as I mentioned, to the ABPS for donating this collection to the Schomburgs, because records like these are vital in helping researchers like myself challenge the way history is structured and whose stories are prioritized. They give us a glimpse into the quotidian activities of historical actors and provide a voice to underrepresented figures. Today, I will speak briefly about the importance of immigrant social organizations to the Caribbean American experience in early 20th century New York. The early 20th century saw the formation of numerous Anglophone Caribbean American benevolent associations and mutual aid societies, much like the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society. Caribbean immigrants looking for a way in which to fit into their new homes often joined existing clubs and in many cases created their own. I have found the existence of 48 distinct social organizations established between 1884 and 1935. The proliferation of social and cultural organizations and their Caribbean immigrant participation is significant for several reasons. First, many Caribbean immigrant associations were organized by specific islands, highlighting the fact that these groups initially saw themselves as nationals from their own individual islands, not as the collective group by which they were categorized by default. Later, through cross-cooperation with mutual aid societies or benevolent associations from differing islands, an important goal of many of these organizations became fostering collaboration and unity among Caribbean immigrants as a whole. It is in the context of social and cultural organizations in the U.S. that Caribbean immigrants first saw themselves as Caribbean or West Indian, as opposed to Antiguan, St. Lucian, or Jamaican. Through these organizations, a unified Caribbean identity was fostered that did not exist prior to immigration to the United States. This fact is evidenced in the ABPS records as we see numerous correspondence between the Society and other Caribbean social organizations, as well as cross-participation in each other's social activities. As a Caribbean American identity formed, these once Caribbean-specific social and cultural organizations widened their scope and reached out to African American social and cultural groups. Caribbean groups influenced and were influenced by the community in which they now lived. African American groups extended invitations to Caribbean immigrants, asking them to join them in social activities, and they in return did the same. As Caribbean immigrants became more invested in the African American community, they championed issues that affected the Black community as a whole. Many Caribbean immigrants even joined African American social and political organizations, such as the NAACP and the Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters, holding multiple memberships in different organizations. These early social interactions became the stepping stones by which Caribbean immigrants and African Americans later fostered larger political connections. Prominent Caribbean political actors such as Arturo Schomburg, Ashiel Totten, Cyril C. Oliver, and Elizabeth Hendrickson all belonged to either one or multiple social organizations before and sometimes while they were participating in political movements. As benevolent associations became more invested in their newly adopted homes, their aims progressively grew more political. Through these once merely social organizations, Caribbean immigrants worked together with African Americans to fight social inequality within the U.S. Their political agenda is further highlighted by the association's growing diasporic concerns, emphasized in the international initiatives that many Caribbean American associations undertook to help people of African descent within the Caribbean and throughout the world. Many of the organizations gave scholarships to students in the Caribbean, actively supported Ethiopia during the Italo-Ethiopian War of 1935, and fought to end segregation laws in the U.S. I posit that by the seemingly simple act of attending a dance or church service, Caribbean immigrants and African Americans were in actuality developing a community base that would later be used for political mobilization. A third layer of significance in examining Caribbean social and cultural organizations are the women in these organizations. Caribbean immigrant women played a very important role as the founders and participants of many of the various benevolent associations. Although not reflected as much in the leadership of some benevolent associations early on, women made up a large percentage of the membership. Half of the ABPS's first members were women. They served on various committees and in various capacities. In heavily male-dominated associations, women frequently organized their own auxiliary groups. They took on important executive positions and ran their own programs, ensuring that their views and interests were addressed. In this capacity, women were able to wield full control of their own organization and take on positions that they might not have normally. Associations became a training ground for female leaders, and Caribbean immigrant women were able to gain professional experience running and organizing clubs. The history of Caribbean immigration and immigration in general tends to normalize the male experience. However, through their participation in social organizations, women can be seen as active participants in the immigrant experience. Examining women's roles in Caribbean immigrant societies provide an important voice to an often neglected aspect of the Caribbean immigrant experience. In closing, I believe that culture and politics are intimately linked, and it is only through careful analysis of Caribbean immigrant associations and organizations that we can fully explore the genesis of Caribbean political activism within the United States during the 20th century. Collections such as the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society records help to change our understanding of politics and identity in the historiography of Anglophone Caribbean immigration to the United States. Once again, I'm truly grateful to the Society for their generous donation. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. It is indeed an honor to be here today. This exhibit is entitled Lighthouse in New York. The concept of the lighthouse is rich with symbolism, in particular the symbol of the keeper of the light, vigilantly offering guidance, salvation, safety, and knowledge. It is no wonder that the lighthouse has become the symbol adopted by the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society, since for Antiguans and Barbudans of the diaspora, the Progressive Society, as well as the Antigua and Barbuda House in Harlem, have always represented our home away from home. As you examine the exhibit, I urge you to think of those names of the individuals mentioned and those who left behind all they knew, owned, and loved to make a new life in New York. We know they endured struggle. Indeed, the Progressive Society was created in the middle of the Great Depression and just before the start of World War II. Nevertheless, the founders and early members of the Progressive Society were committed to being their brothers and sisters' keeper. Every document included in this exhibit tells a story. I want to tell one story that resonates with me and which I think is appropriate for this time and place. One of the documents in the records is the 1952 membership application of one Clement Stilson, an Antiguan who emigrated to New York in 1917. Mr. Stilson's signature can be found on the Manifest of Arrivals in the Ellis Island archives. He was 18 years, 2 months old when he arrived. As a young boy growing up in Antigua, Mr. Stilson was turned away from the library because his parents could not afford to pay the membership fee. As a matter of fact, most blacks could not afford the membership fee, and the public library in Antigua was a place where they were not welcomed. In 1952, he was interviewed by the New York Amsterdam News, and Mr. Stilson stated, and I quote, "Several weeks after I came to the States, a friend asked me if I would like to join his library branch. I was amazed to discover it did not cost anything, like such memberships in Antigua. With the help of the Progressive Society, he began shipping newspapers, magazines, and books to St. John's. Following a return visit to Antigua, Mr. Stilson resolved to establish a free library for everyone. An article in May 16, 1990 edition of the New York Times stated that Vere Conwall Bird, a labor leader at the time, offered to house the library in St. John's Union Hall in 1946. Today, under the auspices of the Stilson Library Restoration Committee, that library survives on Redcliffe Street in St. John's. Mr. Stilson and the Progressive Society were true keepers of the light. As most of you know, we lost the home of the Antigua Public Library in an earthquake on October 8, 1974. I was 9 years old at the time. That was 39 years ago to date. The doors of the new library are yet to be opened. Now, if Mr. Stilson, with the help of the Progressive Society, was able to build a library despite such obstacles as World War II, then let us resolve to do what we can to ensure that 40 years do not pass and find the doors of our National Library still closed. Today's exhibition stands as both a tribute and testimony to the men and women who selflessly dedicated almost 80 years of service to the Harlem community and to the Antigua and Barbuda diaspora. With God's grace, our lighthouse in New York, the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society, will continue to shine brightly for years to come. Thank you. Before we move on to the question and answer section, it's come to my notice that Prime Minister Baldwin wants to make a few remarks, but he also has to leave. So at this time, I'd like to invite him to the podium to speak.
Thank you very much. Let me greet all of you and to let you know how very pleased I am to be able to say a few words on this occasion where the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society, in collaboration with the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, will present a lighthouse in New York through the exhibition that will be taking place here during the period September 27 through January 4, 2014. As an Antiguan and Barbudan, I'm extremely proud of the fact that those Antiguan nationals who migrated to this country in those early years of the 20th century were able to establish a society that was centered around taking care of Antiguans and Barbudans who happen to live and reside in this country, particularly in this area, and also to develop an outreach, reminding themselves from whence they came, and to be able to make the connection with their homeland. The history is rich. The history is powerful. The history tells some tremendous stories of the interaction and togetherness of Antiguans living in this area, and also to connect it to the history of the struggles of Black people in this society during those critical years. So I just wish to commend the Antigua and Barbuda Progressive Society for the tremendous work that it has been doing over the years. Some of it remain completely unrecognized, but nevertheless, you cannot be weary in well-doing. And also, it is important to recognize the fact that the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture and Black History would also be part of the expression of seeking to remind us of who we are, from where we came, the struggles that we had to endure, and the successes that we would have made over the years. So congratulations are clearly in order, and I want to commend both institutions for the tremendous work that they are doing. May God continue to bless each and every one of us. Thank you very much.
Halcyon was filled with music, carnival and everybody high. Sweet little girl Lucinda, she want me dancing partner jamming. Hallelujah. She jam me and then I jam her. Everybody jam together. That bed was hot like